Welcome and thank you for joining us today for From Workload Automation to Agentic Orchestration, what the 2025 EMA Radar reveals about enterprise control. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be moderating today's event. Our featured speakers are Dan Twing, President and COO of Enterprise Management Associates, and Guy Eden, VP Product Management at BMC Software. Dan joined EMA in 2005 and has over 25 years of experience in information systems, software development, and technology outsourcing. Dan focuses on all aspects of intelligent and automated management of IT. Guy joined BMC in 2018 and is responsible for product management for Control M. His prior experience includes a variety of technical and commercial leadership positions at many financial technology companies, including SunGard and the London Stock Exchange, creating business-critical services for Tier 1 financial firms. And before I hand things over to Dan and Guy, I wanted today's audience to know that they will be concluding their presentation today by taking your questions. Do feel free, however, to log them anytime using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA that will include the on-demand playback as well as additional resources from today's event. So be sure to check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our first featured speaker, Dan Twing. Dan?
Thank you, Raleigh. Well, welcome everybody. I hope you're all ready to hear about what we think, Guy and I think, where things are heading here. I'd like to start with the acknowledgement that, we've just been through a lot of change in this category, and then AI hit, right? So we've been feeling pressure for a while. We have this compounding pressures of, cloud native and bringing everything modernized, data pipelines and everything that's happening there, and then boom, AI, right? So you can see that folks have been feeling this pressure for a while. The whole modernization and of automation and IT generally. In 2022, I asked people how they were feeling and how that was putting pressure on the workload automation tools. And 77% said, yeah, it's asking way more of that software in 2020. And you can see that kind of trended up to 87% by 2024. So, we're all feeling this pressure, and we're trying to sort out, what does AI do in the midst of all of this? So this is more of a hypothetical chart, but this might put some of that in perspective. So, that whole journey, pre-2020, we were really just doing the old things better and more of it. Lots of spread of use cases. So the basic tool just started automating more things. And then as we got into 2020, we really started to have to focus more on orchestration. Things are getting more complex. So we see more end-to-end digital orchestration, more augmented AI, AI augmented things. These are all starting to come online in 24 and as we moved into 25. And some aren't online yet. Some are about to be staged. But we really are starting to shift where we're more worried about observable workflows and not just broader observability, but more awareness about the automation. And we're moving into agentic AI automation, which is heading us towards self-healing systems, which is really that future. So we've ridden this curve, and all of that pressure is all of that purple bit there. And now we're entering the green, and it doesn't slow down. So, Guy, has that pretty much fit with your journey lately?
I think it definitely does, especially looking at the future. And I think we'll end up by zooming in a little bit on that green area and seeing what we think about what that means for the future, particularly of enterprise orchestration.
Yeah, Guy's going to give us a detailed view of what they see in the little tail end of that, from agentic through self-healing, when we get to the end here. So orchestration is really being evaluated on business outcomes. The whole shift of focus on, instead of process and calendar and time, it's business outcome, right? End to end. But we can't lose sight of the fact that when we ask which of the following areas are your primary focus in the next 12 months, this was a 2024 study, operational efficiency is at the top of the list. So I included this slide mostly to say AI is adding value, and Guy's going to show us a lot of cool places where it's adding value, but don't lose sight of the main objective here. It's not AI for AI's sake, right? Everything is about better operations. So, if AI doesn't do that, we shouldn't be doing it yet, right? And so I think, the survey shows that people have their priorities still, in that place, and we shouldn't forget that. Yes, innovating. In the time of this survey, we still talked about it as digital transformation or modernization, but yeah, we're doing that, but that's still not ahead of pure efficiency. That's the point of all of it. So AI is an enabler of smarter orchestration, and some of the early ways that it emerges, we can see AI-driven predictive analytics that are optimizing job scheduling. I mean, even in 2024, about half the market was taking advantage of those capabilities, enhancing anomaly detection, things like that. As you go down this list, there's less participation, and we're really not doing the more complex things that we will someday be able to do. We still pretty much treat these things as a process that happens sequentially, and we analyze how well it went. We've built in some dynamic capabilities in there, but they're all still very deterministically controlled. As we get into AI orchestration, we have the ability to let the AI focus on the outcome and not the process. And the process may not always be fixed. Now, we're a ways from that yet, but this is going to have an impact on how we can get work done, and it hopefully gives us more ways to get it done and keep the operation buzzing. So let's talk a little bit about what that is. And I've got about 5 slides that walk us through orchestration, but we're going to take them in piece parts and give Guy a chance to bring what BMC is doing in as we kind of walk through what is this going to look like. But if you think about workload, in fact, I focus more on the picture here even than the words. Workload, at the beginning, it was a lot of calendars and time-based stuff. So you had apps and other workflows spinning around out there, and mostly workload was watching the clock for us and making sure things happened either by an event trigger or a time trigger. And we put a lot of time into spreading this across everything critical in an organization, going from just get this report there to what's the overall outcome. And this software has been doing a lot for a long time, but when AI comes into the mix, and even with a lot of the digital transformation we previously just, deployed, and we're still working on that. We're 65, 70% of the way through that across all the enterprises, but complexity comes in, and, there's an inflection that when you bring in AI, it doesn't really reduce that need for orchestration. Somebody still has to coordinate things. And there's really 3 forces that are driving advantage. Agentic AI is going to occur across multiple domains. We need observability to know current state. So a lot of why observability has been rising up in importance really across IT, but specifically also within this category, is that as soon as you want the software to make decisions, it has to have more state awareness than it's had in the past. And that state awareness is everything it's trying to control and everything it's trying to run on. So how's the infrastructure doing? Do I have enough capacity? Where else might I go? Is there another way to get this job done if this service isn't available? Could I take a different path? AI will be able to do some of those things we're not doing today, but the complexity has been rising, and there's a lot of focus on smarter and more dynamic and situation aware control and flow. Orchestration really brings that. And Guy, you've got, orchestrations existed in these products way before AI. It's just that it's getting more complex, but I'm sure you could tell us about clients that take advantage of that and have for a while.
Absolutely. And let me just add my welcome to everyone that's joined us. Thanks very much for that introduction, Dan. I think you're absolutely right. A lot of this, first of all, has to focus on the business outcome. That, of course, is a starting point. That's where all of our customers look. So this is about some really complex problems, because all of our customers, they're running very complex, mission critical orchestration systems. They need to do that on scale. Everything has to happen on time, as usual. But at the same time, we have to transform and modernize the technical landscape, leveraging data and AI to maintain that level of competitiveness. And this is a really complex proposition. At the same time, their businesses are becoming a lot more competitive as well, which means that when you look at the end-to-end business process, that needs to scale up irrespective of technology, which means you need more observability, and that single plane of control becomes even more critical. So just to sort of give us a starting point to understand the complexity of the problem, I've put here just a few examples just to give people some food for thought. These are customers that have every kind of technology imaginable, from mainframe through the cloud, through to running most of their business in SaaS. And again, they need to be able to sustain this production while they're changing. And as AI comes in, that gives them an even greater challenge. So we have examples here of financial services customers who are moving workloads from the mainframe into the cloud. And you imagine the complexity of that on its own. You've got a really mission critical, really reliable mainframe system, but now you're moving all these things piece by piece into the cloud. If you want to change that even further, that's a very, very delicate proposition. You need to work out how to govern that. We've got customers who are running extremely complex data pipelines, which today are at the base of their business, where they're large airlines, or who knew that pizza was so dependent on big data, but it turns out to be. All the way through to healthcare, and in some cases, critical healthcare, where we have customers who have used the orchestration that we provide to optimize patient care during the COVID pandemic, for example. And we've got a few more examples on the next slide as well. And you'll see that all these examples all span multiple domains. We have many different types of applications here. Some of them are legacy, some of them are said cloud, SaaS, many, many different sources of data, a lot of different types of infrastructure, lots of additional add-ons around like how we do complex file transfer. So you can see some of the scale here. Amadeus is an incredible company that power a vast majority of the online ticket sales in the world for airlines. And you can see the numbers here. We've got retail chains who want to grow. It's an example of a retail chain that was adding 2 branches every week. That's an incredible, incredible pace of change with the right orchestration layer to manage the huge amount of data that involved. They didn't need to spend a lot on IT, which is a great thing. And we had our pizza, so now we need a little bit of dessert as well. Sounds simple, chocolate, but actually the ability to manage your warehouse, manage your supply chain, and then get insights into your sales through using a huge amount of orchestration to manage all of these different processes, but get some kind of insights out of them is absolutely critical. So this is our starting point. Our starting point, even before we add AI into the mix, is already extremely complex. And the challenge here is really how we can apply AI from our perspective inside Control M and also orchestrate all that AI outside Control M to enable our customers to transform their businesses as they're continuing to run them. It's a very interesting challenge.
It's an interesting time to be doing this for sure. And so, Guy just kind of set up this slide, which is, so what happens with AI? What happens to orchestration? Because all of a sudden, individual AI frameworks, whether they're AI native, whether they're within a domain of another software application, like say ServiceNow or in SAP or Sales, you've got Agentforce within Salesforce, within their domain, they will be doing some of their own orchestration. And if you think about it, apps have always orchestrated their own workflows within their domain, within their app. Sometimes they lean on workload for some assistance and file moving here or there, or, midday, file cleanups, what have you have going on. But the apps have always done a certain amount of their own orchestration. And then it's really workload gets involved when things enter and exit or cross those domains more often than within them. There's some within, but all of a sudden we're going to have all these other little places where there's even more orchestration going on. So how does this really play with workload? And this is where, before I move forward to that, Guy, you wanted to take a moment, because part of the modernization has been that this market's been heading towards SaaS, and not everyone got there at the same time. But it was a big lift for BMC because there's so much complexity, and you guys have really stitched this together well. I'll give you a chance to comment.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. That's a great introduction. Thank you. So we started our SaaS journey a few years ago. Now, as I'm sure many of the viewers know, we orchestrate some really major mission critical workflows. You saw some examples earlier. So it's not an area where naturally people gravitate towards SaaS. The flip side of this is that the administrative overhead of having a lot of on-prem systems to do this is also very high. So we're looking for the optimal solution here. We know that some of our customers are not going to put their mission critical production into a SaaS system anytime soon. The flip side is, there are lots of customers who are ready and willing to do that, and the number is increasing. We have some great proof points, by the way, which are quite impressive. We have one of the world's largest investment managers who is now moving all their workload across into our SaaS system. We have the managers of one of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds. We have some very highly regulated utility companies. We have one of the world's largest airlines. So these are all companies that are under a huge amount of compliance pressure, regulatory pressure, but they've seen fit to move across, which is, for us is great. But for those that are not willing to put everything, all their eggs in one basket, as it were, we also offer a unified view. So the question is how you can continue to transform, make use of the latest technology, but still run some workloads in a mainframe because as opposed to the previous example, you're not going to leave the mainframe anytime soon. So this is where this unified view comes in. And again, it's all about a single plane of control, but allowing you to run some workloads in SaaS, some on-prem, that could be in the cloud, and it could be physically on-prem, run your mainframe, but again, through that single plane of control. So it really allows you to scale up if you want to. You can scale across different systems. For us, it also allows us to scale down because now we're seeing more and more companies that may not have used controller in the past. This makes it a lot more accessible to them. Obviously, it doesn't have the overhead of having to install and upgrade the various parts. So that's really exciting for us. And on the next slide, we have just a little example. This is a major insurance company in Japan. They really wanted to move as much as possible into SaaS for the usual reason, removing the overheads of managing on-prem systems. But at the same time, they had a mainframe and they couldn't get off that anytime soon. So this really enabled them to do that. It gave them some real business outcomes in terms of reduction in TCO, reduction in all kinds of other processes, and just allowed them to free up a lot of things to enable them to concentrate back on the business outcomes that we were talking about before. So it's a nice example of that unified view approach.
Well, and I mean, what you've done with the unified view is you've given, it's a hybrid answer that can be tipped in whichever ratio works for any given client. If I am 100% in one camp or the other, or I can be 80, 20, 70, I mean, it doesn't matter. You've given me the option to decide that. And yet you've embraced and accommodated the fact that, we're controlling stuff that runs everywhere, and some things are easier to control if this thing lives up in the cloud. I mean, it just makes more sense. So, I guess the biggest story for me here is you were ready just in time for AI. I mean, because it does demand that. So what does that mean then? We have all these different environments. We've got SaaS, we've got mainframe, we have a unified view, but we're going to be controlling a lot of things. And all of a sudden we're going to have, AI orchestrators out there that need some oversight. There's just certain things that cannot be handed off to AI in the workloads. I've been thinking a lot about this, and agents, there's an intelligence, so they can infer things. And they can infer things in the moment with observed state data that makes orchestration smarter. But everything we've been doing before this, some of those rules can't be inferred. SLAs are hard contractual requirements. Cutoff times or delivery times of a file to open the bank are hard set. So we can't throw out all of the deterministic rules that we've been living under. And they're so complex, but they live inside of the workload softwares that have been doing this for years. So the two are going to have to play nice, because workload is still going to have to bring what it's always brought. It's the referee in and amongst all the apps. These agents are just little tiny apps, and there's groups of them that focus on a certain outcome that we would have called an application holistically, but there's just going to be more of them, and they're going to have smaller tasks, and they're going to be flexible in how they combine to get work done. And we're going to have to be able to allow them to do that within their domain of authority, and yet stop them when they're leaving their domain of authority, and make sure they live under the authority of the more global, constraints around those outcomes. So it isn't just as simple as saying, oh, I put AI in, all of a sudden I don't have all these old problems. No, if you were making 1 million decisions a day before, you're going to be making 10 million a day in the IT after AI. There is more velocity and more control that's going to be required, not less.
Yeah.
My opinion on that one. And Guy, you can, I know you all started with the AI assisting first, and then the rest of that complexity grows after that. But we can make what we've already been doing better with AI, and you guys have been doing a great job of that.
Well, thanks a lot. Yeah, so from our perspective, exactly as you say, there's so much complexity in what we do that as soon as you begin to introduce AI, the question is really how that governance comes in. Just a little anecdote. One of our banking customers told us that every time somebody takes $1 out of the ATM, there are 60 different applications that have to do something, some before, some during, and some after. And that's part of what we orchestrate. Now, you imagine that each of those, the different applications, different places, different infrastructure, now you AI infuse them. That's a governance nightmare. Because they're all doing different things at different places. We're beginning to do that, of course, in Control M. So I thought I'd throw up an example here of some of our AI assistants. This is intended to make things a lot easier for our users, particularly for users who are less familiar, so that makes it a lot more accessible. So when they want to build one of their workflows, for example, they can use natural language. It's a very obvious application for AI. You can see we're trying to get to a point where the language used is quite abstract. So you're not really telling it what to do. You're giving it a very generic aim. So this is real agentic stuff. And then Control M will provide you with some guidelines, maybe use the information it's already got or the existing workflows to suggest some solutions. So this is just one example. This is assistive AI inside Control M. The more interesting thing is what happens outside of Control M. When we start to connect out to other agents that our customers are using, the governance there becomes a lot more interesting. I'll just give you one example of one of our telco customers who, like many retail firms, they do a kind of sentiment analysis on their customers. That may be analyzing sentiment from comments on social media. It may be analyzing tone of voice in the call center. And then they come to the conclusion that whoever's just phoned is actually sounding quite annoyed, and he also made a negative comment on social media. This is a very typical thing. Today, that all works with AI. That's been around for a long time. But now the process by which they decide what to do we send them a discount, special offers, whatever? That process is still very manual. And they're looking at how they replace that with AI agents. But then you begin to look at what that means, and it's not that you replace a person with an agent. You have agents that make the decisions, but then you have other agents performing parts of the governance role. You have, of course, other agents that make sure the proper guardrails are in place when that information goes out. These agents are environmentally aware and aware of the amount of load on the system. So when there's too much load on the system, they self-spawn. So all of a sudden, in our Control M terms, this is like suddenly having a new job that suddenly appeared in your workflow as the workflow is running. So when it comes to things like how you manage the SLA, we need to take a very different approach to this. So I've tried on the next slide to summarize a few of the elements. If you take a typical walkthrough of what we might do, if we take that example of workflow creation and we're deploying a workflow that is now going to manage some agents outside of Control M, what does that mean? The interesting thing here is that some of what we need to do already exists because it's existed for a long time. Our workflows are very often mission critical, so the human in the loop has always been there. It doesn't matter who creates the workflow, an agent or a person. There's a standard check-in process. There's a standard process to make sure that workflow meets the standards that you've put in. There's another interesting question there. Does this mean the person who gives the AI prompt, do they need to remember to say, make sure you apply the standards for the finance department? Interesting. User authorization, of course, has always been there, but now there may be additional considerations. Is this user authorized to incur a specific amount of cost? Because now all these agents cost us a lot of money. Of course, guardrails on the prompt. So let's make sure there's no PII floating around, no language that's not safe for work. I think I told you earlier, Dan, little story. We had one of our designs for some of the guardrails here, and something had got chopped off one of the slides, and this guardrail was about better profanity, which I thought was quite amusing. Might see that one. So we've got authorization and prompt guardrails at the user level. There's a deployment when we want to deploy this into production, and most of that already exists because we're already very careful about that. Runtime is probably the most interesting one. At runtime, we need much clearer observability into what's happening. We need a lot of guardrails. Job elasticity is what I referred to earlier. That's how I talk about these self-spawning agents. So we need to be able to understand when that's happening. What does that mean in terms of cost? Do we need to be able to define some cost limit as part of that job before we even deploy it? All these things are producing some kind of output. Those need to go through guardrails again, typically once more PII, profanity, all that kind of thing. And then there's a big question of how you then manage the SLA across all of these things. End to end, it's easy, but actually understanding now when you're halfway through a process, what's happening with SLA is actually a lot more complex. So these are all really interesting points that we're looking at. And then the final thing, of course, we're in an enterprise world, so everything has to be audited. We need to be able to understand the agent reasoning in some cases. So maybe we need that as part of the audit trail as well. This is a big deal in the whole agentic world. So I think this is a nice little summary of a lot of the governance steps that we need in these kind of environments.
What's interesting is that, AI can seem strange and new, but in many ways, it has all of the same control concerns that we've had with an application, just at a more granular level, and they can take some twists and turns that they're not predictable like what we used to have, right? They can do different things. Like you said, all of a sudden there's a new job in the stream. You have to, be ready for that. But really, it is interesting how much the control surface that was there works for this, because Workload's been for 40 years, 50 years, been absorbing new tech. Every time it shows up, AI is just one more new tech. It's a very big one, but honestly, the control plane can take it. You just had you have to build it in, but you had the hard points to bring this in.
And actually, let me give you one more example, because we've had customers who, for a while, before AI, before LLMs and so on, they would create dynamic workflows. So based on the output of some particular process that's happened elsewhere, they would actually build a workflow on the fly, dynamically build that, inject that into Control M and run it.
Yeah, deterministically decided, not
right.
decided
So
on the
that's based
fly.
on
But you've been
templates
branching all along. Yeah.
Exactly. And now the question is, okay, and back to this deployment piece, do I allow an AI agent to actually create that workflow, which might be more efficient, it can do more things, but then where's my governance? Do I actually need a human in the loop? That's a very interesting question.
Yeah. Yeah, human in the loop's interesting too, because I'm already looking ahead to say, when do we start collecting? And maybe you're already doing that. The kinds of statistics that say how many times did the human agree with the AI?
Right.
When can under what circumstances can I now pull the human out? I mean, I'm now to the next stage. We haven't even, we don't even have that problem yet, but the next problem is going to be get the human out. And there will be ways to do that too. Right now, we're more worried about, let's make sure we can trust this stuff. Then we'll start to figure out how to back away. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, when we do this, when it works right, Workload sits in the role it's always sat in. There's still an overarching orchestrator worried about all of those global constraints the enterprise is worried about that are not something you infer in the moment. We're going to get better at getting to the outcome faster because we can infer things on the way, but there's plenty of things that are not inferred. They are deterministic things we've always been worried about. And what we're showing you here is a framework that essentially keeps the old in balance and absorbs the new. I mean, that's about the best way to say it is we preserve all of the controls that you've always had, and we slowly back them away as we get comfortable. That's the simplest way, I think, to say it. To try to do this globally across an enterprise without these kinds of tools would really be a problem. I mean, if you just AI'd up one little corner inside one little app's domain, fine. Soon as you start crossing in and out of it, somebody else has to be the referee on what are the global constraints. And that role doesn't go away just because AI should. I think that for me, it took me a while to get there too, but it really does continue to matter. And it really, you have to mix in the probabilistic without breaking all of the deterministic guardrails. And that's a challenge. And that's what Guy and team have been doing. And part of that is you got to talk to a lot of stuff to do that, right? We've been talking to a lot of stuff anyway, because we've just been getting smarter about orchestration. Just getting better about it deterministically took all this, right?
That's absolutely right. I love the definition. I'm going to use that. Just talking to a lot of stuff, that really summarizes it. We've got I think the point here is all about handling these heterogeneous environments at scale. We've talked about the complexity, and then when you add AI in, it becomes even more complex. And this is really an example of the breadth of stuff that we're talking to. Some of this includes traditional systems and traditional databases that we've done literally for 20 or 30 years or more. Others are new cloud services. Some of these, our friends in the hyperscaler world come up with new services every other day. So we need to find a way to keep up because, again, as our customers are trying to keep up with the latest trends and making sure they're competitive, they need to be able to connect out to these. I think the depth of integrations as well also goes to operational resilience. You want to have a lot of different options when you're connecting. You might have several different cloud vendors as part of your resilience strategy. So you need to be able to connect to all of those. And all of that ends up as part of the same workflow. I do want to call out a couple of things that we've done recently, and one is all about being event-driven. So, and this connects very much into the AI world. So, as one of our customers told us, most of the time nowadays, stuff doesn't happen because it's 5 p.m. on the last business day of the quarter. It happens because we've done some processing over here, we've got some conclusion, and that needs to trigger a specific workflow. And that's really all about being event-driven. So, one of the other things that we've done here as we increase the breadth and depth of the integrations is to be able to connect out to messaging and event-based services. See there, Amazon SQS, SNS, Service Bus, RabbitMQ, Kafka is also there, so that we can actually be a lot more reactive to things that are happening in the organization. Some of what you might need to react to is a problem that's come up because one of your AI agents has spotted a problem in another AI agent because that's responsible for the governance. And now you need to do something quickly, but then to do that, you need to trigger a process in your orchestrator. So it's sort of coming full circle with all these integrations as well.
Yeah, and I actually borrowed an earlier version of this slide a couple years ago because everybody's dealing with it, but you guys are just cranking these things out on a schedule. I know you started with that, application integrator to let people do it themselves, but most people went, yeah, but we're happier when you do it and make it backward compatible. And you guys just have put a team to this, and they don't. It's like a list that just doesn't end, right? I mean, it's something new comes up, and you guys just have to keep bringing them in. And this really helps to show the complexity involved, right? I mean, things have to flow in and amongst all of that to get enterprise work done. I mean, so, now let's get down to, the headline of this was, what did we change in the radar then? I mean, we just described kind of what's been going on. Well, there's a lot of density here. I'm not going to get into all of that, but this was I've been doing this report now. EMA's been doing, I think this was our 8th one. We do it about every 2 years. We've been doing this now since 2010. And this, every year I let all the vendors, I first review it for what might have changed. Then I let all the vendors submit new things we measure. Not everybody's participating every year. It depends on what they put new in their product and whether I captured it or not. But we do a process of updating it every time. And it's collaborative. And there's some years it's more change than others. This was the biggest amount of change ever in this measurement stick. And in some ways, it's set up now. I shouldn't have to change it a lot for the next couple of years because there's a lot of what we know is going to take time to do that I'm measuring in here, right? Like the AI metrics in here are far deeper than what everybody has at the moment. So, not that we're not going to learn things and add a few things in when we do this again, but this was a pretty radical update to the measuring stick because we just talked about all the radical updates Guy and team and everyone else in the industry's been doing to this class of software. So, I'm sure, many of you may already have seen the results from the radar, but just in summary, this is what it looked like in 2025. One of the biggest changes is, I went from 19 vendors to 10 because not everybody makes the cut to AI. I mean, straight away, half the market isn't taking that journey. I mean, they're, at least not yet. These are the ones that can make the leap. And, and I guess we've done this 8 times. BMC has been in that value leader category every time, but I would like to point something out. If you go back to earlier ones, I don't know if I have a pointer here, but BMC was in the upper left part of that dark green triangle, right? always high on the list of features, somewhat back a bit because there's a lot of complexity. But as they brought SaaS forward and unified view and simplified things, they're starting to move right on all the reasons that make the product easier to deploy. It's easier for smaller organizations that guys said can now take advantage of this power without a lot of on-prem stuff because the SaaS is there. So they shifted this dot a bit based on bringing SaaS forward. And, this is really, for me, I chose to say excellence in mission critical orchestration as a special award this year. I think it's just hard to all of these softwares are focused on mission critical, obviously, but BMC just tends to attract and serve and make happy some of the most complex enterprise clients out there, and they do a lot of it everywhere globally, and they've moved them to SaaS. They've done all this without breaking things for people, and that takes an awareness of production that a lot of modern developers don't really even remember anymore. I think for me, it was time to really acknowledge that this product, not does it just hang with all the new ones, but they have been on the front line of production for a long dang time. And, Guy, congrats to be able to keep doing that and modernize without breaking that.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's really nice to hear. I think, for us, we're really doing what our customers are doing as well. We're running the software that we have at the same time as we're transforming it. So like moving it to SaaS, like adding more and more AI features. I think, it's a real skill. I mean, it's great to see that the people I work with that are taking all these things very, very seriously, making sure that, again, the production items stay absolutely stable and robust, but at the same time, being able to transform Control M into the system of the future as well, whether that's moving into SaaS, whether that's providing all the AI functionality that we're putting into the system, whether it's providing what our customers need to orchestrate their much more complex AI pipelines in the future. So it's very exciting.
When we take just a quick closer look, and I would just encourage you to, I know that, this report's available from BMC directly, and, you should go read it. But one highlight here, just the analysis, if you haven't seen me talk about it before, most of you probably have, we kind of break it down to 5 big categories. And, the functionality and the architecture and integration, to me, those are about the product strength. Those two parts of that pentagon chart there are what drive the up and down axis on that bubble chart, right? So, you got to have the right undercarriage and you got to have all the features. And this is where product managers really start to, make their impression on a product. You can spend a lot of time building a solid undercarriage and not deliver features. That doesn't help. Or you can focus on features and it isn't extensible over time. Those have to be balanced. And you can see here the green is the average of the market. BMC just blows the average away all the way around, except on cost, because guess what? A really good product that can stand in the heat of production is not inexpensive. So you got to pay for all that goodness. I can't ignore that, but it's worth it, or they wouldn't be doing it for so many big logos. I mean, it comes down to that. So, if there's one little nick on that chart, it's that, you get what you pay for. Simple enough. And this can stand and deliver, but that's really how you read that chart. I just want to say that kind of where the market's at, at least the 9 and 10 vendors on that chart are all taking this next leap. Not everybody is breaking through in the same way. Not everyone's starting from the same place. So, the big 3 things that are having to change is absorb agentic AI. I'm even playing past just AI up the tool itself. Assistance, that's kind of almost a given now. But you have to be able to absorb the agentic AI and govern it correctly with human in the loop and all of that. You've got to step up the intelligence around controlling and orchestrating things. And you've got to step up observability so you have the state data to make that work. And all the tools have to do all of that. And that's a big task. So, everybody is in different places on those 3 things. And BMC is just moving very, very purposefully to absorb all of that. And Guy, you had to make the trade-offs of where you start and how you get to that outcome, because it's not something that happens in a single release, is it?
It certainly isn't. It's, to use a cliche, it's a journey.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And so, we promised up front that Guy was going to give us a little bit about what is that current journey look like. And in some ways, you can think about this being more granular detail to my kind of between agentic to self-healing journey. I don't know, Guy, you might be a little more specific about what part of that curve, but this is a view of what it looks like to tactically plan how to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is really how we see things evolving over time. As you said, Dan, this is essentially the more future-looking part of your chart from the beginning. What we like to think about is, first of all, problem complexity. So that's on the y-axis there. We start with very simple assistive AI, creating workflows. Very common is a chatbot that goes and looks at all the documentation. Everyone has had one of those for a long time. Then it becomes more consultative. Then it becomes a little bit more autonomous, but still with a human in the loop. And then the ideal is to get to the point where we trust the AI enough, the agent enough, that it can really act autonomously, begin to self-optimize, understand the process happening around it, and adapt as we go. So really environmentally aware, self-learning, and autonomous, which means you trust enough. That's very frightening. The question is how we get there. And when we look at how we get there, we look at that x-axis, which is really all about the breadth of context and the depth of data. And when I say breadth of context, I think that one of the core themes that we've talked about throughout this session has been the complexity of workflows that occur in a lot of enterprises in particular. In order to be able to know that my AI is acting appropriately, I need all of that context. I'll go back to the example of the 60 applications to get $10 out of an ATM. Those things together need to work, and they all need to work correctly. So that's the breadth of context. At the same time, AI needs data. We haven't really stressed that point so far, but in the end, without the right data, none of the AI can work. So having that depth of data and the breadth of context together is what's going to bring us to the point where we have that genuinely autonomous, environmentally aware, self-learning, self-optimizing agent. So that's really what we're trying to say in this graph, as we get that broader view, which you can really only get with an orchestration system that has that broad view in the first place. That's going to bring us to the point where we have those agents. Whether we genuinely trust them or not, that'll be yet to be seen.
Yeah.
But the technology will take us to a point where we can do it, I think.
Well, what I've come to understand, and I've been struggling with this for a week and a half now, is, data and data intelligence. What I've come to realize is that we used to worry about data volume. So we used to have a process of deciding what we leaked out or just purposely put out of an application, right? If you've never built apps, you don't realize all of the things an app might be able to know. Files that come out of apps don't show everything the app knows. That's why when you're debugging, you write new lines to show you what's going on sometimes, right? So I think what I was struggling with is just the transactional data we've always had. Better intelligence there isn't really what the AI wants. If you're just reporting on something, or even BI doing deep correlation analysis, that's one level of understanding of the data within an app. But to actually control orchestration, you need not just the data outputs, you need things that we have previously not exposed outside of the app. Decisions made in the moment, why it took this fork or that fork, so I've started thinking about that more as meaning rather than just data. Now, it's all data, but to me, data was the transactional files that came out,
Yeah.
and we used to go, gee, we have to make these efficient. So let's pick and choose what we let out and what we don't need to let out. But when you start to try to orchestrate it, you need some of the things we didn't used to let out because we didn't need to, right? And we lost the habit of considering, and we just assumed the file will have everything we need now. But we need to relearn that practice, not because we quit doing it because we didn't have to be efficient anymore, right? With data, bandwidth got bigger, file storage got better. We all wanted more data. But really, what we're struggling with agentic AI is that the data has to have a level of controllable data, like things that we didn't used to put in transaction files that the AI needs to make these decisions on the fly. And we'll get there, but that's it. That's to me, I've really been focusing on the data problem. And it isn't that the data, we don't have an awareness of what happened in the app as an output, but you have to understand some of the intermediate stuff the app never leaked out before, because that's required when you're starting to try to control things. It's a different game than BI.
Absolutely. I think this connects back to the sort of this idea of agent reasoning. We talked about the audit trails earlier, and it may well be you need to understand the level of that reasoning in order for the orchestration to continue correctly. So that's very different. It's not just the output. It's not what comes out of the process. It's also why the AI took that decision to generate that particular data. So
Yep.
yes. Yeah.
So, neither guy or I are sitting here saying we know how everything's going to work out. Some of this is still being sorted out, but a lot of AI hype confuses the fact that real work has gone on and there is a way to safely move forward. And you just saw it painted out by one of those that are blazing the trail right now. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Raleigh for Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Guy. Before I jump into Q&A, I just wanted to encourage everyone to scan the QR code so you can get this guide. And also you will be receiving the slides today, so you can also scan it from there if you miss it right now. So let's go ahead and jump into the questions. I'll throw these out and you both can provide your feedback. The first one is, how do the workflows integrate and handle the outcomes, particularly decisions, because of the probabilistic nature of AI?
You're living it, Guy. I'll let you answer it first.
I actually think it's a good question because it actually connects back to what we were just saying. One is that there's a new level of data that we need to understand here, which is what reasoning was employed by an agent in order to be able to take a decision. That's something we don't really know how to handle today. As Dan, as you were saying, this is slightly cutting edge, and I'm not sure anyone's looking at that in the context of orchestration. So I think that's one element of it. Obviously, we need guardrails. We've talked a lot about guardrails. So ensuring that the output is sensible and in accordance with what you're expecting, and again, is not breaching any particular rules and compliance rules and so on. That's critical. So in terms of the output or outcomes, the decisions, I think it's all about guardrails, right? We know it's probabilistic. We need to be intelligent enough to work out those guardrails. And if you recall my chart, again, the more breadth of context and depth of data that we provide to the orchestration layer, the more we'll be able to do that. So to reiterate, it is going to be a long journey, and I think people are not yet aware. I'm sure, by the way, at some point something will go wrong somewhere because somebody will put too much trust in AI and it will do something completely unexpected and indeterministic. And these things already happen. We see that with chatbots and so on, and even companies, large companies, the Microsofts and Googles of the world, who have huge amounts of money to invest and are probably the world's biggest experts on some of these things, but they still manage to create chatbots that suddenly say something racist or profane or whatever, and they immediately have to shut them down. So I think it's a challenge, but making sure we can integrate with all the right services to provide the guardrails, making sure that we understand what parameters we need to provide to the agents, which constrain them from the outset, making sure that we understand the output and the reasoning. I think those are all core to making sure that we can control that.
And then what happens next is the human in the loop is the safety valve or the checkpoint. Then we will slowly learn when and how we can back them away, within this part of this use case, but never if it goes to this point, right? There's always going to be some things that we likely reserve, but the important thing is it'll be a learning curve, but the controls are there so you can move in that direction slowly and purposefully without loss of control. But once you do turn it loose, yeah, we probably will get some surprises as well. And but hey, when have you ever deployed big IT changes and not had surprises, right? That part of our life has always been dealing with the surprises, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, Raleigh, you have any others?
Yes. Who creates and maintains the source of truth for orchestration needs?
Ooh. Interesting question.
Well, no, say the last part of that again.
No problem. I'll just
For
repeat the question.
orchestration needs,
Yes.
no one person. It's everywhere, right? It's the person who designs the agent, gives it a certain amount of control. The overriding guardrails, another level of control. I think it's spread out. Some of it is legacy stuff just in the workload that does what it does and will continue to do so. Some of it will be the new human in the loop stuff. I don't know, Guy, if you have a better way to say it, but I don't think there's a single place that gets written down, right? It's the combination of a lot of different things working together.
I think that's true, and I think you mentioned. I'll give you another example. You mentioned legacy workflows. We have a lot of customers who've had workflows in place for many years, kind of by analogy with the COBOL programs on the mainframe that nobody knows how they work anymore, but they work. We have customers who have workflows like that. So they don't even know what the truth is anymore. And actually, one of the things we're using AI for is actually help them analyze those complex workflows and tell them what they do in a business context. So we're actually using AI to find out what the truth actually is. And I will say, I just have the Q&A thing open. I see that the same gentleman, lady, has asked, without a source of truth, if we execute 100 times, how do we make sure it executes the same way? Well, I think this is back to the indeterminate piece. I think the question is what kind of workflow you're orchestrating. You're probably using AI to, amongst other things, optimize some of your processes. And when you're optimizing in real time, that means that some of the outcomes will be different because that's what you're looking for. So I'm not actually sure that you want it to, the execution will be the same, but the outcome might be different.
Oh, it's interesting, Guy, because I might have said that one the other way around. In some cases, if you as AI, as we get more towards self-optimization, I think there'll be a shift where as long as we keep our eye on the ball of the outcome, the process may actually be dynamic, right? I mean, we've done that some deterministically in the past, but if 3 different services can fulfill one step in a process, and we have one that we always go to, but it's down. Today, we're down, right? Unless we have deterministic code that says, well, then try it again or try this one. But AI can decide, I'll send this one that way and that one that way. If it's the outcome that matters and not the process, AI can do it differently. But that orchestrator of orchestrator role of the workload tool is to know when the process can vary and allow the AI to vary it because the outcome's more important, or no, this one, governance says the process has to, at least these 5 steps of a 10-step process have to be in this order, have to be this way. Some of it could vary, not all of it. Somebody has to bring that rule to it, and I think that's part of the global orchestrator role of the workload tool. So, I think the point is it won't always be the same later, but under controlled circumstances, well documented and for good reason. And if it has to absolutely be the same every time, there's a way to make sure that happens too.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you both. Let's take one final question to wrap things up. For organizations early in their agentic journey, what's the most common misconception about agentic AI that slows them down? What are you both seeing?
Do you want to say that down? Shall I start?
I'm sorry, Raleigh. Can you ask that again? I was looking at the chat, the question list here because
no problem. For organizations early in their agentic journey, what's the most common misconception about agentic AI that slows them down?
So I've been in a couple of customer events where, this has kind of been demoed, and what you see in the room is everything from, I'm ready to pick a few pilots and try it, to I don't see that we'll ever do that in my company, right? And everything in between. And I think you just have, first of all, I think picking a vendor who, you don't necessarily go it alone. And if you're doing it within one domain, like I would think you could deploy stuff within ServiceNow's environment and it's probably well tested. But as soon as things start crisscrossing out of that, you need the control layer you've always trusted on. And it should have oversight and orchestration by workload. And we kind of talked a lot of different ways that then can be controlled. So pick some processes that aren't as critical, make sure human in the loop is there, roll them out slowly, maintain control, get the metrics in place so you know when if the human is only overriding a process 30% of the time, what can you figure out about the 70% of the time it's not that you can let through without kicking it to a human? We aren't quite there yet, but start slow, start purposeful, and pick a vendor who can walk it with you. Would be my advice. Guy, you probably have things to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all true. I think that the key really is we've talked a lot about governance. I think the key is to understand how you embed governance from the outset, and to make sure you think about that from the outset. I think a lot of people get very excited by a lot of AI stuff, and they start with assistive AI, which is relatively harmless. It's just giving you some feedback, and you may or may not use it. But as soon as you start automating with AI, that governance has to be in place on day one. Anything that feeds that AI, if you're using data to feed that AI and train some models and things like that, these things all need to be part of that process. It's not standalone. You're not just plugging in an agent. It's understanding there's a whole ecosystem around it that you need to get right, whether that's governance, getting the data right. So making sure really that that's embedded all the way through from the start, I think is critical.
Excellent insights. Thank you both. And I wanted to thank our audience for taking time out of your schedule to join us today. As I mentioned, you will be receiving a follow-up email from EMA with resources from today's event, so be sure to check that email out. Thanks again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks very much.